LoveLore Library. Chapter 553. As Pei Chi walked to the elevator, the assistant said respectfully, "Boss Pei, Mr. Tang would like to invite you over for a moment." "Tang Yu? Didn't he leave already?" Pei Chi was a little confused, but she still followed the assistant. In a high-class office on the top floor of Marvel, Tang Yu was sitting behind a wooden desk flipping through documents. He was a little fast, and he did not even look up when she entered. He only said calmly, "I only have 2 hours here." It was just a few words, but Pei Chi's heart ached. She nodded and walked over slowly. Carefully, she said, "Tang Yu, is it hard?" "Yes. A little." He smiled and gestured for her to sit. "I can probably spare 10 minutes after looking at these." "Oh," Pei Chi replied and sat on the sofa, feeling deeply ashamed of herself. Compared to him, her busy schedule was really nothing. After a while, she sounded like a kitten. "Tang Yu, did you take over Marvel because of me?" Tang Yu nodded calmly. "What else can I do? My little idiot has been schemed against by the old master. If I don't take over Marvel, my idiot will be sad if she doesn't get the contract." Pei Chi stood up and ran over to hug him from behind, her little face resting on his shoulder. She said softly, "Tang Yu, you're getting better at saying nice things." He nodded and looked at her sideways. He only smiled. "Pei Chi, I won't be able to concentrate on work if you do this." She leaned on his shoulder and laughed, acting especially coquettishly. Tang Yu stroked her little head. "Chi, even without you, I would still have taken over the Lin family. But it would not have been so fast." "Actually, you can take on the headquarters, you don't have to take on Marvel," she said. How could she not know that he was doing this for her? As soon as she said this, Tang Yu's pen paused, and then he said meaningfully, "You want me to watch you and the prince together?" "Petty." She leaned on his shoulder and wrapped her arms around his neck. She was so wrapped around his neck that his soul almost left his body. How could he still be in the mood to deal with work? "Chi." His voice was a little harsher. Pei Chi chuckled. She pressed her face against his shoulder and smelled his pleasant scent. "What can I do for you, Mr. Tang?" Tang Yu took a deep breath and pulled the little person behind him into his arms. He firmly trapped her, not letting her escape, and not letting her have the chance to do evil. He stared into her eyes and slowly said, "Pei Chi, do you want me to teach you with my hands?" "Ah." She covered her face, and her little face was a little red. He was too shameless. Tang Yu simply hugged this little naughty thing and signed with one hand. She slowly calmed down and lay in his arms obediently, watching him deal with work. It was already an hour later when Tang Yu finished dealing with these matters. When he looked up, Pei Chi also looked up and looked at him. "So good." He lowered his head and kissed her, as if he was rewarding a little pet. Pei Chi's little face blushed. She looked at him and said, "Where are you going next?" "Back to Xingyuan. There are 2 meetings in the afternoon. There are social engagements at night." His voice was a little hoarse. The reason why he asked her to stay here was because he would be very busy and might not have much time to accompany her. Not only was there work, but there was also the wedding. Chapter 554. Tang Yu packed up his things and called his assistant through the internal line. He handed the documents to him and said, "Give these instructions. Call Xiao Ran if you need anything." The assistant nodded. He was also surprised by Mr. Tang's efficiency. Tang Yu was already walking out with Pei Chi. He said calmly, "Let's have dinner together later. Be good and wait for me to come home." She heard his hint and blushed. "I have dinner tonight too." Tang Yu frowned. He seemed to have thought of something. "Do you need to drink?" "No need." It's a good client. There's a table full of people. Besides, I know what I'm doing. Speaking of this, her voice was gentle beyond her years. Because she knew that Tang Yu had quit smoking and drinking for the sake of the child. She wouldn't touch it. He was probably happy when she said that. He rubbed her hair and was about to enter the elevator. Pei Chi grabbed him. Tang Yu, isn't this too high profile? If I were to compete, there would be people gossiping. Not only did he not let go of her, but he also half carried her into the elevator. How could that be? As he spoke, he let out a low chuckle. Chi, are you especially confident? Pei Chi looked at him. Her eyes were particularly attractive. She pouted and said wickedly, I'll show my ability first. If I can't beat Mr. Shin, She leaned close to his ear and said in a seductive voice, I'll just have pillow talk. Tang Yu coughed and adjusted his clothes. His voice was also hoarse. Who taught you this? Pei Chi said wickedly, Mr. Tang, it's your ex-girlfriend. The charm in Tang Yu's heart disappeared instantly. Shun Lian was really worrisome. He didn't say anything but just patted Pei Chi's little hand. Pei Chi also felt a little dull and a little jealous in her heart. It was normal for him to have an ex-girlfriend, and she wouldn't be too bothered about it. However, an ex-girlfriend who always made life difficult for him made him feel particularly uncomfortable. Not to mention, this ex-girlfriend's eyes were filled with ambition, and it was written that she wanted to tear apart her man and eat him alive. Of course, Pei Chi would mind. When she sat in the car, she stopped talking and sulked. Tang Yu continued to read the document and didn't say much. I don't want to eat. She threw a tantrum. I want to get off. He finally put down the document and looked at her. Pei Chi, are you jealous? No. She turned her face to the side. But what she didn't know was that the word jealousy was clearly written on her little face. Tang Yu just looked at her and smiled. He hugged her and kissed her. Why are you angry? He whispered something in her ear and Pei Chi's face instantly turned red. She pushed him away and said, No way. He looked at her and smiled, his face full of indulgence. In the end, they still ate together. It was light and nutritious. Later, Pei Chi realized that no matter how busy Tang Yu was, he would find time to have a meal with her. Only she could understand that kind of sweetness. After the meal, Tang Yu had a lot of things to do, so he asked the driver to send her back to the company. He leaned against the car door, bent down and said, Chi, get ready. He didn't know that the Shin father and daughter would be here today. If he had known, he wouldn't have agreed to meet them. As for Shin Lian, his patience had run out. He nodded at Shin Zhongshan and Shin Lian, got up and walked out. It was 10:00 at night, the busiest time of the night. As he walked along the corridor, he could hear voices coming from the private rooms from time to time. Tang Yu was noble and untainted. Suddenly, a pair of soft arms hugged him from behind, his body froze. Other than Pei Chi and Tang Xan, there was only one woman who dared to hug him. Chapter 556. Tang Yu's body stiffened, then he narrowed his eyes. Let go, he reprimanded, giving her the last shred of dignity. Shen Lian did not let go. Instead, she hugged him even tighter. Her voice was a little gentle. Tang Yu, I won't let go. Once I let go of you, you'll be with someone else. Tang Yu was about to break free from her, but when he looked up, he saw Pei Chi standing there with a pale face. Beside her was Xiaowen. Their eyes met. Tang Yu did not know how other men would feel when they met their wives when they were having an affair. But at this moment, he was really fucked, even though it was a misunderstanding. Shen Lian hugged him from behind. Her exquisite face was slightly raised, and she looked at Pei Chi with a hint of provocation in her eyes. Pei Chi looked at them, then her gaze shifted to Tang Yu's face. His gaze was indifferent as he broke free from Shen Lian and walked over. Pei Chi was stunned for a moment, then she quickly ran out. Damn it. Tang Yu chased after her. Shen Lian called out his name heartbreakingly, Tang Yu. Tang Yu did not stop. He did not stop for her, not even for a second or a minute. Under the illumination of the lanterns, Shen Lian's face was already covered in tears. She stood there, unwilling to admit that she had lost completely. She and Tang Yu had been together for so many years, but it really could not compare to the few months that Tang Yu and Pei Chi had been together. She slowly squatted down, crying like a little girl. She had not been as willful as a little girl for a long time. She cried until her voice was hoarse. Suddenly, a piece of tissue was stretched out in front of her. Shen Lian was stunned. She called out to Tang Yu softly. When she looked up, she only saw Xiaowen, Pei Chi's secretary. Her eyes were guarded as she looked at Xiaowen. I don't need your fake kindness. Xiaowen sighed and squatted down. Look, such a beautiful face. Is it worth it for a man? Especially a man who didn't love her. Shen Lian snatched the tissue from her hand and wiped her face so hard that her face was almost ruined. What do you know? Was Tang Yu an ordinary man? Do you know how happy I am when I am with Tang Yu? Shen Lian seemed to be recalling something. You know, many people say that we are a good match. Seeing that she was bewitched, Xiaowen kindly reminded her, the man you love doesn't love you, but you're so good that you can have many men who love you. Shen Lian's voice was a little frantic. Can they compare to Tang Yu? Tang Yu, so perfect, so good. Xiaowen sighed. No matter how good he is, he's just an ordinary man who sleeps with someone else every night. She gave up on trying to convince Shen Lian. Anyway, this kind of rich missy was always self-centered and the whole world revolved around her. After Xiaowen left, Shen Lian covered her face, but tears still flowed out from the gaps between her fingers. Shen Zhongshan walked out slowly. He had heard and seen everything just now. He said in a low voice, Shen Lian, give up. Shen Lian opened her eyes slowly and looked at Shen Zhongshan. Her lips curled into a strange smile. Dad. You're asking me to give up too. Shen Zhongshan frowned. He looked at his daughter, feeling that she was a little strange. Did she know something? Shen Lian continued to smile. She widened her eyes and looked at Shen Zhongshan. Dad, don't you love me the most? Tang Yu is not someone I can force. Shen Zhongshan's tone was a little heavy. You're not a child anymore. Don't do such things in the future, okay? Really? Shen Lian smiled gently, tears flowing down her cheeks. Chapter 557. Pei Chi was caught by Tang Yu at the entrance of the hotel. He hugged her from behind and said in a low voice, if you don't run, I'll let you go. She lost all rationality and struggled. Tang Yu, you bastard. You can say something else other than bastard. He carried her easily and walked to the parking lot. Pei Chi was furious. She lowered her head and bit his hand. Shameless. Tang Yu was a little depressed. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Pei Chi, is that all you know how to say? His hand hurt a little from being bitten by her, but he didn't care. He half dragged and half carried her to the car. She wanted to climb out of the car, but the door was locked. Her head fell heavily on the back of the seat and she saw stars. Scumbag, pervert, shameless, bastard. She scolded him again. Tang Yu quickly sat in the driver's seat. He looked at her in the rearview mirror for a while and fastened his seatbelt. Scold me harder. He put his fingers on the steering wheel and realized that there were a few deep teeth marks on his fingers. Pei Chi, are you a dog? He touched his forehead. He knew that the little girl was not easy to appease. But he didn't explain immediately. He started the car and drove to the rose garden. Pei Chi's petite body sat in the back seat. She bit her fingers and turned her face away from him through the window. She was full of anger. Once they got there, he didn't restrict her freedom. Pei Chi ran upstairs, packed up her things and ran downstairs quickly. Tang Yu stood downstairs, took off his tie, rolled it up and put it on the sofa. He looked at her and frowned. It's not what you see. Pei Chi ignored him. She walked outside. Let me remind you that I threw away your car key. There are no cars here. If you want to go back, you'll have to walk for an hour to find a car, he said slowly. Then he sat down on the sofa and unbuttoned 2 buttons. In fact, Tang Yu wasn't in a good mood either. Pei Chi walked over, picked up the handbag in her hand, and threw it at him. The metal buckle on the handbag scratched his handsome face, leaving a thin trail of blood near his ear. It wasn't serious, but it didn't look good. This was the first time she had made a move against him, and this move was out of control. Pei Chi's little fist pounded on his chest as she pursed her lips tightly. He also let her hit him. After she vented her anger and had no more strength, he then grabbed her little hand and pulled her into his arms. All right, have you calmed down? How could he have anything to do with her? Pei Chi glared at him. I saw her hugging you. Mr. Tang, hugging your ex-girlfriend in a hotel at night, what kind of social interaction is that? He smiled bitterly, knowing that she wouldn't believe him no matter what he said. Sighing softly, he said, I didn't know she would go. Pei Chi didn't care. She had gone too far just now, and now she couldn't find a way out. Moreover, she really felt that Shen Lian was a crisis between them. She wouldn't pester Tang Yu. That was useless. If a man didn't have you in his heart, it would be useless even if you slept by his side every night. Moreover, the Pei Corporation was now looking for a partnership with Marvel, so Pei Chi made a bold decision. She looked at him and raised her hand, not letting him come closer. I'll move back first. Tang Yu moved his body forward and raised his long legs slightly. As she groaned, he asked in a low voice, when will you forgive me? Ha! Actually, there was no such thing as forgiveness. There had never been anyone else between them. Pei Chi moved her hand away and ignored him. If she ignored him, he would feel that it was meaningless. However, she had underestimated Tang Yu. His long legs continued to lift upwards and grind against her thighs. Chapter 559. Baby, tell me, when are you going to forgive me, His face was close to her ear as he murmured. That pure masculine scent was very alluring. Pei Chi gritted her teeth and said in a soft voice, I won't forgive you. Then I can only wait. He chuckled and let go of her. Pei Chi's hand fell down and her body was still leaning against the wall. She felt weak. He was despicable. He flirted with her and then, he said he didn't want her anymore. Her eyes were as moving as rippling water. She bit her rosy lips and pressed her hand against the wall as she looked at him. Tang Yu pinched her face. Goodbye, Boss Pei. When he kissed her just now, he called her baby. Now, he called her Boss Pei. Pei Chi was so angry that she kicked him. Tang Yu turned back to look at her. He didn't think much of it. He just smiled and quickly went downstairs. Pei Chi's face turned red and she calmed down for a long time. This bastard. She didn't want to forgive him. However, what should she do if she wanted to get pregnant? Pei Chi could not think of anything no matter how hard he tried. Seduce him. Make him drunk. No, no. Pei Chi never thought that Tang Yu would use hunger marketing on her. She finally opened the door and went home. She received a call from Tang Xian. That heart-wrenching feeling made her want to drag Tang Yu back, to do something that would make her pregnant, regardless of her pride. Tang Xian finally said that she was sleepy and hung up the phone. Pei Chi took her clothes to the bathroom. As she soaked in the bathtub, she looked up at the ceiling. Her mind kept thinking about the scene tonight. She thought about how Shen Lian hugged Tang Yu. At this time, in the middle of the night, Pei Chi admitted to herself that she cared about him very much. She cared about him. She had a past with Shen Lian. She cared about him and was hugged by Shen Lian. She kicked her legs and let out a long sigh. It turned out that she was such a petty person. Of course, when she asked herself if she had ever doubted him and if her trust in him had wavered, she really hadn't. She wasn't that stupid. She wasn't sure when he was willing to go through so much trouble to be with her. But she was angry. Moreover, she felt that she had the right to be angry. Pei Chi sat in the bathtub and walked out. She dried her body and applied moisturizer before putting on her bathrobe. When she was lying in bed, she received a call from Tang Yu. He snorted lightly, "You're home." He grunted and then asked her meaningfully, "Did you miss me?" "No." Pei Chi reminded him, "Mr. Tang, don't forget that we're in a Cold War now." Tang Yu nodded again. "That's true." Pei Chi thought that he was going to hang up the phone. Tang Yu stopped her with a faint smile and asked seriously, "Chi, you really didn't miss me?" "No." She hung up the phone angrily. Even though she hung up, she seemed to be able to hear his low laughter. How hateful. Pei Chi's face was burning. Actually, she was thinking about him. She covered her head with the quilt and didn't let herself think about him. Later, she went through all the cases of the Pei Corporation with her eyes wide open before falling asleep. The next day, she naturally didn't have enough sleep. When she went to the company, Xiaowen said that she looked very listless and even looked at her with a gaze that made people's hair stand on end. Pei Chi glared at Xiaowen. Xiaowen then looked away and said softly, "There's a guest." Chapter 560. Pei Chi looked at Xiaowen with a hint of doubt in her eyes. Xiaowen's voice became softer. "It's Jin Taiha's Mr. Shin. Because he has a high status, I made the decision to let him into Boss Pei's office." He just entered. Pei Chi stared at Xiaowen and forced a smile. "Go make a cup of tea. Bring my dad's favorite Thai guanyin tea." Xiaowen nodded and opened the door for her. Pei Chi entered. When the door closed, her gaze fell on the figure standing by the wall. From the back, he looked tall and straight. It was impossible to tell that he was in his early 50s. Shen Zhongshan, who was originally looking at Pei Mingyi's portrait, slowly turned his head and quietly looked at Pei Chi when he heard her coming in. Indeed, she and Pei Mingyi did not resemble each other in the slightest. Even their expressions were different. Pei Mingyi was such a nice person. How could he raise such a stubborn child? Shen Zhongshan finally smiled. "Can I call you Chi?" Pei Chi smiled and walked to the sofa. She gestured for Shen Zhongshan to sit down. "Of course, Tang Yu will call you uncle." Her stance was made clear in one sentence. Shen Zhongshan's expression was complicated. After he sat down, Xiaowen walked in with a teacup. She glanced carefully and left after putting down the teacup. Pei Chi looked at Shen Zhongshan. "Uncle Shen, this was my father's favorite." Shin Chongshan took a small sip and smiled. Pei Mingyi has taught you well. Pei Chichi lowered her eyes and smiled faintly. Maybe. Shin Zhongshan's gaze was fixated on her little face. Pei Chichi's gaze froze the moment she looked up. She was surprised and did not know how to deal with it. After all, the other party was an elder. His identity was so special. Shin Zhongshan looked at her picturesque face. Especially when she looked down just now, he was in a trance. He actually called out Zhao Ke's name. However, his voice was hoarse and low. Pei Chichi seemed to have heard Zhao Ke's name. She was a little surprised. She looked up at Shin Zhongshan and asked, "What did you call me?" When she asked, it was very difficult. She was afraid that she had misheard, but she would rather she had misheard. Shin Zhongshan came back to his senses. The muscles on his face twitched a little as he forced a smile. I mean, you look a little like Ziyuan's ex-wife, but she's already passed away. Pei Chichi's lips trembled. If Shin Zhongshan could say this, it meant that he also knew. For a moment, she was speechless. Because she couldn't figure out the intentions of the man in front of her. Was he using her as Zhao Ke's daughter to persuade her to leave Tangyu? Shin Zhongshan saw the wariness in her eyes and smiled helplessly. You don't have to worry, I came to ask you to leave Tangyu, moreover, I don't have that qualification. Then, can you tell me the purpose of your visit? Pei Chichi lowered her head. You're not here to drink a cup of tea from me, right? Shin Zhongshan sighed in his heart. What if it was? But there were some words that could never be said. He looked at Pei Chichi and cleared his throat. With some difficulty, he said, last night, Shen Lian was willful. It was Ziyuan who asked Tangyu out. Tangyu didn't know that Shen Lian and I were here. Pei Chichi looked at the elder in front of her. He was more easygoing than old Master Shen and not as sharp as Tang Ziyuan. However, she also knew that Shin Zhongshan wasn't a simple person. If he was simple, Jin Taihe wouldn't be ranked second in B City or even the whole north. Chapter 561. Pei Chichi smiled. Uncle Shin, there's really no need for you to make this trip today. Tang Yu has already explained everything to me. Shin Zhongshan smiled as well. It's good that you've explained it. Pei Chichi did not want to be rash, but she still went straight to the point. Mr. Shin, if you have anything to say, you can say it directly, there's no need to beat around the bush. However, I will not give in to Marvel's case. Of course. Shin Zhongshan's gaze was gentle. I might really be here to ask for a cup of tea and to chat. Young lady. Pei Chichi was stunned for a moment, not daring to believe it. Shin Zhongshan had already stood up. I have something to do, so I won't disturb you anymore. As for Shen Lian, I will convince her. Pei Chichi watched him walk to the door and could not help but ask, why? Shin Zhongshan's body froze. He stood there for a long time before he turned around, still looking as calm as ever. I'm doing this for my daughter. Pei Chichi smiled slightly. I know. Shin Zhongshan's expression was complicated. Chichi, you don't know. However, how could he say those words out loud? In the end, he still left. The door closed, and Pei Chichi sat alone for a long time. She was still in a daze when little one came in to clear the tea. Boss Pei, there's a meeting in a while, little one reminded him softly. Pei Chichi then came to her senses. Oh. The topic of the meeting was the competition against Marvel. Pei Chichi formed a team during the meeting. There were 6 people, her, little one, 2 employees from the planning department, and 2 from the advertising department. There was a man and a woman from the planning department, and 2 female employees from the advertising department. After the meeting, Pei Chi held another team meeting to distribute Marvel's documents. She sat at the head of the table and said slowly, "This time, we are not only facing traditional companies but also a strong opponent like Jean Taihe. Therefore, we have to come up with ideas that are clear enough." She had just finished speaking when the pretty lady from the planning department, Little Gao, frowned. "Boss Pei, we can't possibly beat Jean Taihe. Jean Taihe has gathered the best planning talents in the industry. However, they may not have ulterior motives." Pei Chi interrupted her and said, "According to what you said, other companies don't need to participate. Isn't it easier to directly choose Jean Taihe?" Xiao Gao didn't say anything else. Pei Chi paused. "I know it's hard, but if the Pei group doesn't even have the courage to try, it means that they will never be able to walk out of such a small circle. They will forever live on the charity of others." Of course, Pei Chi wouldn't say the last sentence out loud as it would damage her reputation. Next, they discussed the progress and division of labor. It was already noon when the meeting ended. Pei Chi took Xiaowen out first. Little Gao watched as he left and complained, "This time, I have to work overtime to death." Anna from the advertising department lay on her stomach. "I haven't been so tired in a long time." That's right. When the old president was around, life wasn't so hard. The salary wasn't low, and things were easy. It's not like now. Little Gao rolled her eyes. "If there's a next company, I really want to throw these documents in her face. I won't do it anymore." Ding Ku, who was in the planning department with her, smiled. "Before you have the courage, I advise you to come up with something that satisfies Boss Pei." Chapter 562. Dink was a little patient. "Little Gao, don't forget that you are working for Pei Corporation now." Little Gao glared at him. "Then you can be a lackey for the rest of your life." With that, she left in her high heels. The few people at the scene looked at each other. Little Gao's mood was not right. Should we tell Boss Pei? Anna could not make up her mind. Another person from the advertising department smiled. Little Gao said it herself. "Who is behind Boss Pei? It's fine. What can happen? What's more, Boss Pei might not be that stupid." Anna calmed down and thought about it. She did not say anything else. On the other side, Pei Chi and Little One entered the office. Little One could not help but ask, "Boss Pei, you mentioned that Little Gao last time. You said that she did not meet the company's requirements and wanted to fire her. Why did you let her participate in such an important project this time? You have to know that if she is disloyal, she can sell the company at any time." Pei Chi sat behind the desk and smiled. "I was afraid that she would not sell it." Little One was stunned. Pei Chi looked up at Little One and said slowly, "Jean Taihe's manager Shin must be more determined than me. Therefore, it is impossible for her to not make a move. In that case, I will open the Pei Corporation to her." Little Gao was a gap in the Pei Corporation. It was also the safest place. Little One did not expect Pei Chi to be so black-bellied. After a long time, she said, "Stealing the company's secrets will cause her to go to jail." Pei Chi smiled. "Do you think Little Gao is so stupid? She won't create any accidents." Little One suddenly felt that she was a rookie in front of Boss Pei, who was in his early 20s, with 4 years of experience in the workplace. Yes, she could not be blamed. It must be Mr. Tang's words and deeds. Yes, it must be his words and deeds. Little Gao felt balanced when she thought about it. Pei Chi flipped open the document and said softly, "I will be a little busy from now on. Keep an eye on the team." Little One nodded and leaned over. She said eagerly, "Boss Pei, are you going to design a plan yourself?" Pei Chi nodded. Little One immediately took a few steps back. Pei Chi didn't raise her head as she smiled. Little One, I won't let you be arrested. You didn't do anything bad. Xiaowen scratched her head. It's better not to know. Don't worry, Boss Pei. I will keep this a secret. I trust you. Pei Chi smiled. Oh yeah, call President Qin of King Entertainment. Tell him I have something to talk to him about. Aren't you afraid that Mr. Tang will be angry? Little One asked with a smile while holding the documents. Pei Chi glared at her, and Xiaowen didn't dare to say anything else. After Xiaowen left, Pei Chi had lunch. Without taking a nap, she began to think of a concrete plan. She wrote and drew to deny countless of them and threw them all into the wastepaper basket. She felt that something was missing. Marvel, these two words, she almost achieved it even in her dreams. The meeting with Qin Anlin was scheduled for 2 days later. She went to King Entertainment's headquarters alone. This was Pei Chi's second time going to King Entertainment. Her mood was completely different from the first time. Qin Anlin's secretary opened the heavy wooden door for Pei Chi. The door opened wide, and the scene inside was something Pei Chi would never forget for the rest of his life. Pei Huan was lying on the office desk, her clothes disheveled. The person on top of her was none other than Qin Anlin. Both of them were hot and sweating profusely. Pei Chi stood at the door while Qin Anlin closed his eyes in enjoyment. Chapter 563. Qin Anlin's body stiffened for a moment, and then he quickly left Pei Huan without a trace of reluctance. Pei Huan wanted to hug his neck, but Qin Anlin avoided her. He tidied up his clothes, looked at Pei Chi at the door, and smiled faintly. Boss Pei is very punctual. Pei Chi's gaze was still on Pei Huan. Although she had long known that Pei Huan had fallen, she had never thought that Pei Huan could do such a thing. She no longer cared about any reputation, only her goal. Pei Chi had roughly guessed Qin Anlin's intentions, but she really did not believe that he would be so absurd. Pei Huan lazily got up from the desk, lazily pulled up her skirt, and looked at Pei Chi. What a coincidence. Pei Chi's gaze was still on her body and face. Pei Huan's face still had a desire that could not be removed. She curled her lips and looked at Pei Chi. Soon, her expression changed from laziness to fierceness. Pei Chi, don't use your preaching to influence me. If you have a conscience, return the Pei Corporation to me. I will not send my father's painstaking efforts to your hands. Pei Chi stood there, the blood in her body frozen. Pei Huan curled her lips, took out a slender cigarette, lit it, took a puff, and sprayed it on Pei Chi's face. She said frivolously, "Then are you willing to watch your father's daughter be pressed under another man?" Pei Chi looked at Pei Huan and said word by word, "That is your choice." Pei Huan's choice was one mistake after another. The Pei Corporation could not help her. She was so depraved that she could squander the Pei Corporation in 2 years. Yes, it is my choice. Pei Huan's voice became agitated. Who asked my mother to raise an ingrate? Pei Chi looked at her without saying anything. It would be a lie if she did not feel bad. Pei Huan was his father's daughter, but now, she had become like this. Pei Chi's sympathetic gaze stimulated Pei Huan. Pei Huan took a few puffs of her cigarette and chuckled. Don't be so smug, Pei Chi. Until the end, no one will know who sympathizes with who. Enough. Qin Anlin's voice was filled with displeasure. I don't like talkative women. Pei Huan didn't dare to make another sound. It was obvious that she was very afraid of Qin Anlin. Pei Chi looked at Qin Anlin and said calmly, President Qin, can we talk alone? Qin Anlin smiled lazily. Pei Huan moved closer to Pei Chi and said in a low voice, Pei Chi, we are actually the same. Sell them all the same. But, let me remind you, don't be eaten by Qin Anlin. At that time, will Tang Yu still want you? Pei Chi stood ramrod straight. There will never be such a day. Because she was human, she had a bottom line. Pei Huan giggled, and it was a little ear-piercing. After she left, Qin Anlin's little assistant finally closed the door once more. In the huge office, there was still a sense of decadence that could not be dispersed. Qin Anlin sat on the sofa naturally as if such a thing no longer mattered. He looked at Pei Chi. Boss Pei, are you looking for me? Pei Chi's lips moved. I think I have my answer now. Qin Anlin smiled slightly and looked at her from the side. Boss Pei, you are really smart. Do you want to destroy King Entertainment or Marvel? Or me? Pei Chi walked slowly to him and looked down at Qin Anlin. He smiled. What do you think, Boss Pei? Chapter 564. Qin Anlin held a glass of red wine in his hand and played with it with his slender fingers. He chuckled. What a cruel and narrow-minded person. He looked at her. I promoted Pei Huan to be the female lead of the advertisement. That's considered helping her. How can you call it destroying her? You know what she's been infected with. Any scandal would be enough to destroy her. Pei Chi gritted her teeth. Qin Anlin gestured for her to keep quiet and then smiled. President Pei said that he doesn't care. Being so agitated will cause misunderstandings. Pei Chi looked at his hateful face and then at the glass of red wine in his hand. She snatched it away and splashed it on his face. Qin Anlin's face suddenly looked embarrassed, however, he still sat there with dignity. He didn't even wipe his face. He just let the wine drip, drop by drop. It slid across his sexy face and flowed into his shirt collar. His deep gaze locked onto Pei Chi. She still stood there and pursed her lips. President Pei, you're really not that smart. Qin Anlin looked into her eyes. There was a faint spark in them. There are only the two of us here. I can do anything to you easily. Pei Chi smiled. Yes, there are two of us. However, my phone is on the line with my secretary. So, President Qin, if you do anything, I guarantee that you will be sued for sexual assault in less than 5 minutes. Qin Anlin narrowed his eyes and smiled faintly. 5 minutes is enough to do a lot of things. President Pei should know better. You can try. Pei Chi tilted her head and smiled. I don't think President Qin would be so muddle-headed. As she spoke, she looked at him. The sparkling light in her eyes made him unable to look away. Was it because Tang Yu had seen such an expression on her face before? It was a little mischievous and a little naughty. That smile was at the corner of her lips, but it made one want to pick it up and treasure it in the palm of one's hand. While Qin Anlin was in a daze, Pei Chi slapped him. Scum! When she was done, she left. The door opened with a ding, and then closed with another ding. Qin Anlin was left sitting there in a daze. After a long time, he touched his cheek with his hand and felt a burning pain. Perhaps many people said that he was ruthless, unscrupulous, and dissolute. However, no one had ever called him a scum. Qin Anlin had nothing to do with scum, but Pei Chi scolded him like that. His secretary rushed in and was stunned when she saw the fingers on Qin Anlin's face and the wine dripping from his hair. He stammered, President Qin, should we get Boss Pei back? No need. Qin Anlin raised his hand and then looked at his secretary. Don't tell anyone about what happened today. He was splashed with wine and slapped by a little girl. Naturally, this kind of thing couldn't be known by others. The little secretary nodded in fear. When Pei Chi walked into the elevator, she was surprised to see Pei Huan inside. It seemed that she had been waiting for her for a long time. Pei Chi, you can't break it. Pei Huan puffed. President Qin's words usually don't change. Pei Chi lowered her head and smiled. Then, she looked up at Pei Huan. Do you regard Qin Anlin as your last hope? Pei Huan stared at her and did not say anything. Chapter 565. Pei Huan couldn't care less. Am I not miserable enough now? At least, President Qin gave me money. Looking at Pei Huan, Pei Chi couldn't help but recall how she and Pei Huan bickered when they were young. Although Pei Huan was mean back then, she was still a decent girl. She closed her eyes. Can't you quit drugs and live a good life? Here we go again. Pei Huan sneered. Pei Chi, stop acting like a saint. Take care of yourself. Oh right, I heard that Zhao Ke's daughter is seriously ill. You must be worried about her. Why, can't you save her? Pei Huan's face, which was a little thicker with makeup, got close to her. I'm also your sister. Why don't you have any good intentions towards me? My good intentions have been fed to the dogs by Auntie. Pei Chi was expressionless. When the elevator reached the first floor, she stepped out. Pei Huan shouted from behind, Pei Chi, I won't back out. As she spoke, she smiled. Tang Yu already knows that you're here. Pei Chi turned around and looked at Pei Huan quietly. If he doesn't believe me, then he's not worthy of my love. Just like that night when she saw Shen Lian hugging him. But even though she was angry, she believed whatever he said. Because she believed that he loved her and wouldn't do anything to make her sad or embarrassed. Pei Huan was stunned. The smile on her face froze. Pei Chi looked at her and asked softly, Pei Huan, do you know what it feels like to love someone? I forgot. Pei Huan's face was a little ugly. She wanted to smoke again, but she couldn't find the cigarette pack after searching for a long time. The unrestrained life made Pei Huan look a few years older. She was the same age as Pei Chi, but she looked like she was in her mid-20s. She was a little annoyed and looked up at Pei Chi. Pei Chi, what about you? Don't you like Jinrong? Didn't you quickly fall into the arms of Tang Yu? She smiled coldly, turned around, walked into the elevator, and slowly closed it in front of Pei Chi. Pei Chi's eyes felt a little warm as she watched. Her life in Qingshui Road was like a rewind. She was living a tough life. However, she was still a little sad. Pei Huan could have had a perfect life. If she knew how to love someone, she would not be like this. Jean Rong was not cold-hearted, but Pei Huan was not willing to wait. In the car, Pei Chi was in a daze. She suddenly missed Tang Yu. She missed the warmth of his body. Just then, the phone in her bag rang. She picked it up and saw that it was Tang Yu. His voice was a little elegant. I heard that you went to see Qin Anlin. Hearing his voice, Pei Chi felt the gloom in her heart dissipate in that instant. She even felt a little happy. Mr. Tang, do you want to have lunch together? Well, it depends on whether there's dessert in the afternoon. Tang Yu pulled at his tie and suddenly felt a little constrained. Pei Chi snorted. I'll come to you later. After that, she hung up the phone and drove to Xinyuan building. This was the first time that Pei Chi went to see Tang Yu as a girlfriend. Moreover, she was picking up a man for lunch. It was quite strange. However, Tang Yu just sat next to her and fastened his seatbelt. Where are we going? Pei Chi looked at him sideways. You don't mind going to a regular restaurant, do you? She knew that he had never been in the limelight and rarely ate in cheap restaurants. Pei Chi looked up into his eyes. After a long time, she said, "It's Pei Huan." She looked down at the food on the plate and said in a low voice, "When I went there, I saw her with Qin Anlin." "Tang Yu, you know that they're together, right?" She looked up again. Tang Yu nodded. He was more or less familiar with Qin Anlin's way of doing things. Chapter 567. Pei Chi pursed her lips. Pei Huan will be the spokesperson for Marvel. Tang Yu picked up a piece of her favorite vinegar fish. "Are you scared?" Qin Anlin was obviously targeting Chi. Pei Huan was like a ticking time bomb that could explode at any time. Qin Anlin knew it clearly, but he still did it to make things difficult for Chi. However, this was also Qin Anlin's prediction that Marvel would choose the Pei Corporation in the end. "I'm not afraid." Pei Chi sighed. "I just feel that Pei Huan is like that, his heart is uncomfortable." That wasn't a warm home. Pei Mingyi left, Zhou Meilin went crazy in prison, and Pei Huan aborted the child and went on this path. "Tang Yu, I suddenly have a feeling that I'm happy, but I'm a little lonely." The people around her, those who loved her, those who didn't love her, and those who hated her, had all left. She looked a little disappointed when she said that. Tang Yu reached out and stroked her head. "Chi, you still have me and Tang Xin." He smiled. "If you're willing to be a spoiled child, even my mother will treat you like a little girl." "Really?" She looked at him carefully, thinking of being a spoiled child to Lin Yun, of course. He smiled again. "It's time to eat." Pei Chi finished eating and drove him back to the company. When they reached Xingyuan, Pei Chi sat in the car and watched him get out. She glanced at him and said, "Don't think that I've forgiven you. It's just a normal meal today. It doesn't mean anything." Tang Yu had already gotten out of the car, and he bent down to look at her. He couldn't help but feel amused and annoyed at the same time. He knocked on the car window with his slender fingers and smiled. "Pei Chi, let me remind you that your ovulation period is almost over." Pei Chi's vexed thoughts were diluted all of a sudden. Really, why was she talking about ovulation? Tang Yu's voice was low and hoarse, like a killing weapon. Mr. Tang, who had always been noble, was also serious when he talked about such private matters. Ovulation is also a woman's puberty period. Chi, I wasn't wrong, right? Pei Chi glared at him. Pleased, he straightened his body and gestured for her to drive slowly. Then, he turned around and walked into the hall. Shameless. Pei Chi glared at his back and drove away. In the hall of Xingyuan, Xiaoran was waiting for Tang Yu at the door. As he approached, Xiaoran followed closely. "President, the wedding dress has been confirmed by the designer in Milan according to your instructions. It will be flown back next week." She paused for a moment before continuing, "GM Hotel has also completely stopped operating. The designer's plan has already been completed and is now in my hands." Tang Yu nodded and walked into the elevator with Xiaoran. When they arrived at his office, he looked at the plans and was very satisfied. Of course, he also knew that these were the results of Xiaoran going through them first. Tang Yu looked at them one by one and smiled. "Next month's salary increase, I will raise it to the 3rd tier for you." Xiaoran was overjoyed. "Thank you, President. Give me more wedding candies." "Of course." Tang Yu smiled and put down the things in his hands. "Let them prepare first. I will take Chi to try it on one day." Xiaoran also smiled. "Okay, then I will go out first." After she walked out, Tang Yu looked at the pictures in his hands again. Chapter 568. It was not an exaggeration to say that Tang Yu was very busy. However, when his little girl said that she wanted to have lunch with him, he agreed without hesitation. No matter how busy he was, he could not neglect his ovulating little girl. He smiled at the thought of this. Pei Chi would not even have a Cold War. It was probably because of the lingering power of the 100 million yuan from before. Although she would occasionally be fierce, she did not dare to talk back to him most of the time. The Cold War was also cold to the point that it had a special taste. It was sweet. Just like that, they met day after day, just for dinner. His ovulating girl never let him have his way. Even after dinner, when he sent her home and kissed her in the car until her whole body heated up, she would always blush and push him away. A week later, Pei Chi held a team meeting to listen to the progress of little Gao and Dink's work. Anna and the others also listened. Little Gao was very active. She almost credited Dink with staying up late with the project. Dink held back. Pei Chi proposed a revised plan and handed the matter to little Gao to handle. After she left, little Gao looked at Dink. This is the workplace. I have more experience than you. It is inevitable that a newcomer will suffer some losses. Is that so? Dink was very young. He was 26 or 27 years old. After graduating from university, he had worked at the Pei Corporation for more than a year. He was indeed not as experienced as little Gao. He packed his things and looked at little Gao deeply. I don't think you can peep at other people's things like this for the rest of your life. Little Gao smiled and watched him leave. In fact, she did not think highly of the Pei Corporation at first. However, she did not expect Dink's plan to be unexpectedly good and in line with the market. Therefore, she felt that this was her chance to become famous. As she expected, Boss Pei was also satisfied. Then, she would take over and do it well. Little Gao chuckled. Actually, it was nothing much. She was Dink's boss. It was normal for her subordinates to have their ideas taken away. There were still 2 days to submit the ideas. She worked overtime very hard and did it according to Pei Chi's requirements. When she handed it to Pei Chi nodded. Very good. Xiao Gao, I'll leave this with you. Come with me to Marvel tomorrow. Xiao Gao was pleasantly surprised. One had to know that Boss Pei's confidant had always been Little One. Yet, he had actually asked her to go with him tomorrow. What, you don't want to? You've been doing very well recently. Pei Chi smiled as she tidied up the things on her desk and prepared to get off work. Little Gao immediately replied with a smile, how could that be? I just didn't expect Boss Pei to think so highly of me. Before this, I always thought that Boss Pei didn't really appreciate me. So, I'll work hard in the future. Pei Chi nodded. All right. You can go now. Perform well tomorrow. Xiao Gao went out. Pei Chi looked at the closed door. After a long time, Little One came out of the lounge and poked her head in. Boss Pei, Little Gao looks quite sincere. I don't think he will betray us. That's for the best. Pei Chi looked down and smiled. Little Gao, the news of me going to Marvel with you tomorrow will definitely spread. Shen Lian will definitely make a move. Boss Pei, are you really going to give Dink's hard work to others? Little One asked hesitantly. Pei Chi opened the drawer and took out a disc. This is Dink's true standard. Little Gao's was just a classic idea that Dink borrowed from the past. Little Gao actually couldn't see it. You can imagine how much she has slacked off all these years. Chapter 569. In Marvel's conference room, Tang Yu sat at the head of the table and looked around. Finally, his gaze landed on Pei Chi. However, he only paused for a few seconds before moving on. His voice was clear and elegant. This time, the competition will not be open to the public. We will first eliminate some of the teams that Marvel feels are completely unsuitable, leaving behind 5 teams for the final competition. Of course, some people will think that my relationship with Boss Pei will be private. Therefore, the review this time will be carried out by a special department of Marvel. I am only in charge of the final review. Tang Yu looked at Shen Lian after he finished speaking. Manager Shen, is there any problem? Shen Lian knew that he was targeting her. She forced a smile. Of course not. Tang Yu smiled, but he didn't lose his dignity. So, no matter what the result is, I hope there won't be any bad rumors spreading. Not only will Marvel not dare to work with a company like this, even Xingyuan will not dare to do the same. Shen Lian gritted her teeth. After Tang Yu finished speaking, he gestured for his assistant to collect the information and hand it directly to the person in charge of the development department. They handed it over one by one. When it was Pei Chi-Chi's turn, Little Gao suddenly said in a low voice, "Boss Pei, bad news. The disc I put in my bag is missing." Pei Chi-Chi frowned at her. "Look for it again." Little Gao looked left and right but could not find it. She was so anxious that she broke out in a cold sweat. Shen Lian looked here arrogantly with a sneer on her lips. A small company was indeed a small company. It could not withstand a single blow. She looked at Tang Yu. "Boss Tang, I don't think there's a need to let everyone wait for Boss Pei. Perhaps Boss Pei is stalling for time." Tang Yu looked at Shen Lian indifferently. He did not say anything, nor did he help Pei Chi-Chi, nor did he agree with Shen Lian's words. "I'll call Little One. I made a copy with her. She's nearby now," Pei Chi-Chi said calmly and then called Little One. Little Gao was stunned. Boss Pei had a backup. Then wouldn't she be working for Mr. Shen for nothing? Would he take back the 2 million that Mr. Shen had given him? Xiao Gao felt uneasy and his eyes unconsciously drifted towards Shen Lian. Shen Lian glared at her. What was this idiot looking at her for? Was she afraid that Pei Chi-Chi couldn't tell that they had a deal? Xiao Gao retracted his gaze. At that moment, Tang Yu's voice sounded a little cold. "Boss Pei, if the Pei Corporation's proposal document is not delivered within 10 minutes, then the Pei Corporation will be disqualified." A triumphant smile appeared on Shen Lian's face. Pei Chi-Chi was done for. Such a big case was equivalent to old Master Lin's test for her. If she made such a low-level mistake, it would be difficult for her to enter the high society, let alone become Tang Yu's wife, the wife of the CEO of Xingyuan Group. Pei Chi-Chi looked up and met Tang Yu's eyes. Then, she said very slowly, "I respect President Tang's opinion. I hope that Boss Pei can also respect all of us. If you withdraw, then you withdraw. Don't use other improper means," Shen Lian said mercilessly. Pei Chi-Chi waved the cell phone in her hand. 10 minutes haven't passed yet. Manager Shen, don't jump to conclusions so quickly. Shen Lian was a little angry, but she could not flare up in front of Tang Yu. Thus, she held it in. She wanted to see if Pei Chi-Chi had 3 heads and 6 arms to make that little one fly over. Time passed, minute by minute. Chapter 570. Tang Yu was as still as a mountain. He raised his hand to look at the time before saying, 30 seconds left. Shen Lian's beautiful fingers tapped lightly on the table as she looked at Pei Chi-Chi. Then, Boss Pei, you can start praying. I don't believe in religion. Pei Chi-Chi smiled. Shen Lian's expression changed slightly as she glared at Pei Chi-Chi. How could she still smile at a time like this? 10 seconds. Boss Pei. Shen Lian smiled coldly. I know. Pei Chi-Chi was calm and composed. At this moment, the door of the conference room was rudely opened from the outside. Little One stood at the door, panting and wiping her cold sweat. Finally, the timing was right. Boss Pei said that this was the effect he wanted. Pei Chi smiled. The timing is just right. Little One walked in and handed the document to Pei Chi. Little Gao's face turned pale. Little One appeared within 10 minutes, which meant that Boss Pei suspected her. No, wait. Yesterday, she had shown Boss Pei her final draft. However, Boss Pei had not even touched it before he left. Where did the copy come from? However, Little Gao did not dare to say it. That was because she said that Shen Lian did not know how to deal with her. She sat there motionlessly as she watched Little One hand a paper bag to Pei Chi. Her whole body was cold. Tang Yu smiled. Boss Pei, don't do it again. He really had an impartial look on his face. Pei Chi pursed her lips. Of course. Shen Lian was indignant, but what could she do? She glanced at Little Gao, who lowered her head guiltily and did not say a word. Half an hour later, Little Gao and Shen Lian appeared in a cafe. Shen Lian's expression was very ugly. Miss Gao, can you tell me how you work for your employer? You made me lose all my face today. Little Gao was a little guilty. I also don't know how this happened. I swear, I really didn't think of betraying Mr. Shen. Shen Lian took a sip of coffee and chuckled softly. Then she raised the CD in her hand and asked, have you seen the things in this? Seeing that she had calmed down, Xiao Gao couldn't help but heave a sigh of relief. He then said in a low voice, I think you did very well. Not bad. Shen Lian glanced at Xiao Gao and then folded the disc in half. I really don't know how you climbed to the position of director in the Pei Corporation. This kind of thing can only fool Pei Chi, that idiot who didn't graduate from college. How could such a high level of imitation surpass Marvel's top talents? Shen Lian scolded Pei Chi like this, which was equivalent to scolding her, Xiao Gao, as an idiot. She looked at the CD that had been folded in half and didn't say a word. Shen Lian appeared to be very magnanimous as she said, I don't want the money back, but you have to stay in the Pei Corporation and watch over Pei Chi's every move for me. Xiao Gao's lips moved slightly as he weakly protested, Mr. Shen, we agreed on a deal. Yes. Shen Lian looked down at Xiao Gao from high above, yes, I did say that, but you can't do anything about it, so it's not too much for me to add some more. Or, Miss Gao can only return the money to me. That way, we can be considered even. Xiao Gao pursed his lips, money, how could she get the money back? She and her boyfriend wanted to get married. They had struggled for so long, but they didn't even have enough money for the down payment for a house. Therefore, she took the risk and agreed to Shen Lian's request. She only received 2 million yuan. So she called her boyfriend to pay the down payment. Xiao Gao's expression froze. Shen Lian's voice carried a chuckle, you can't take out the money, can you? Xiao Gao's lips moved for a long time, but he didn't say anything. Chapter 571. Then work for me. There was a hint of contempt in Shen Lian's exquisite eyes. After she left, Xiao Gao sat for a long time. She felt her entire body was cold. She had fallen into Shen Lian's vicious circle. She knew very well that if she worked for Shen Lian's demands would only become more and more excessive. This was illegal. Xiao Gao did not want to go to jail, but she did not want to have a wedding without a house. She slowly stood up, her body swaying. Just as she was about to walk out, she saw Pei Chi and Little One standing outside the glass window. Xiao Gao's face was completely pale as she looked at Pei Chi without blinking. Pei Chi turned her head and said something to Little One. Little One walked in and said softly, "Boss Pei wants you to return to the company." Xiao Gao knew that Pei Chi knew that she could not hide anymore. Thus, when she arrived at Pei Chi's office, Xiao Gao went straight to the point and said, "Boss Pei, call the police or fire me. It's up to you." Pei Chi lowered her eyes and said after a while, "I've heard of you before when my dad was still around." Xiao Gao was slightly moved when she heard her mention it because Pei Mingyi had indeed treated her well. "My dad often said that there is a young and energetic Xiao Gao in the company." Pei Chi looked up at Xiao Gao. "He said that the young employee he thinks the most of is you." Xiao Gao was a little ashamed. After a long time, she said, "I've let Boss Pei down." Pei Chi forced a smile. "So, if you're willing to resign, I won't make things difficult for you." She paused. "As for the matter between you and Shen Lian, it's not something I can help you with." This outcome was already out of Xiao Gao's expectations. She opened her eyes and looked at Pei Chi. She could not believe that she was really willing to let her go. "If there's no problem, I'll hand it over to Little One now. As for your salary, I'll transfer it to your account," Pei Chi said calmly. Little Gao stood there, her face pale and then red. After a long time, she finally smiled bitterly. "Boss Pei knew that I would do something, right?" The rookie she looked down on the most actually schemed against her. And what about Shen Lian? They had all been tricked by the seemingly harmless little girl in front of them. Pei Chi said indifferently, "I can't be sure. The only one who can confirm it for you is yourself." Xiao Gao was speechless. He had no choice but to admit that he had created this situation, so there was nothing much to say. She was straightforward, and Xiao Wen went to hand over the job with her. Dink was also in the planning department. When Xiao Gao passed him with his suitcase, he pursed his lips and said softly, "I underestimated you." Dink must have known about this. The young man sitting there smiled faintly. "You overestimate yourself." Therefore, most people who always treated others as fools were fools themselves. Xiao Gao said coldly, "The position of the supervisor is yours, right?" Dink did not say anything. Sometimes, silence was acquiescence. Xiao Gao left without looking back. Perhaps such an ending was the best for her, she had a feeling of relief. After leaving the Pei Corporation, Xiao Gao held the suitcase in one hand and took out her cell phone to call Shen Lian. "Manager Shen, I was fired by Pei Chi." He nimbly tapped on the keyboard. "Shen Lian has never suffered setbacks. Jean Taihe's team is very strong. This is all thanks to Shen Zhongshan's decades of management. Therefore, whether Shen Lian exists or not is not that important." Little Wen coughed lightly. "Actually, you don't have to go into so much detail. Also, you seem to know Shen Lian very well." There was some disdain in her tone. Dink only looked at her and then smiled without saying anything. The three of them looked together. The more they looked, the more they felt that something was wrong. Chapter 573. That's why I said just now that you know yourself and the enemy, you will always be victorious. Ding Ke smiled. The rest is not important. Pei Chi was entranced as she watched. Just as Ding Ke said, the other company's plan was perfect. However, they changed it after getting Jean Taihe's proposal. The result was indescribable. She was about to say something when the office door opened. The person who opened the door was none other than Tang Yu. Tang Yu stood at the door with his hand on the door. He was surprised to see the three of them huddled together, leaning their heads against each other as if they were looking at something in front of the computer. At that moment, the three of them were confused. Especially Pei Chi. She looked at Tang Yu and then at Little Wen and Ding Ke. Jean Taiha's proposal was still flashing on the computer. Ding Ku immediately realized their situation. Obviously, it was extremely irrational to turn off the computer now. He coughed softly and closed the computer. He looked at Little Wen. Shall we go out first? Little Wen's eyes were straight as her gaze landed on Pei Chi. Little Wen was not stupid. Being seen by Tang Yu was a serious matter. Boss Pei. Mr. Tang. I'll leave him to you. Ding Ku quickly stood up as well. The two of them left the scene shamelessly. When they passed by Tang Yu took another look at Ding Ku. He was not bad looking. He was a little too good looking and very young. After the door was closed, Tang Yu slowly walked towards Pei Chi. Pei Chi glanced at the laptop. Why are you here? There's a dinner party nearby. I came to take a look. As he spoke, Tang Yu was already sitting beside her. The sofa sank slightly because of his seat. The sound of his shirt rubbing against the leather made Pei Chi's pores open in fear. She looked at Tang Yu. So, you're leaving in a while? Tang Yu vaguely replied, probably only for half an hour. Half an hour. Pei Chi ran to the bookshelf and took out a thick book to ask Tang Yu for advice. In fact, because of the incident with Shen Lian last time, he hadn't hugged her for a long time. He was definitely not here to teach her these things. What Tang Yu wanted to teach Pei Chi was adult content, the kind that was not suitable for children. However, looking at her eager and inquisitive eyes, he smiled and took the document from her hands. He casually looked through it and gave her a few pointers. Pei Chi listened very hard. She just needed to get through this half an hour. Tang Yu's voice was very elegant and pleasant, and the content was really deep. Pei Chi didn't understand everything, so she felt a little sleepy. You should have saved this on your computer, right? I can't remember it clearly. Tang Yu put down the document in his hands, bent over and was about to open the laptop. Pei Chi's sleepy mood was gone. If he saw it, then the collaboration between the Pei Corporation and Marvel Studios would probably be over. Her little hands suddenly wrapped around his waist, and her face was on his back. Tang Yu. Her voice was a little warm. Tang Yu's hand had already touched the laptop, and at the same time, he felt the warmth on his back. He paused for a moment. Chi. I don't want to learn anymore. She pouted behind his back, and her little hands moved up restlessly. He naturally felt that she was taking the initiative and seducing him. He laughed silently, and his gaze fell on her laptop. Chapter 575. Actually, he only wanted to kiss and hug her. After all, today's matter was very important. However, his little kitten was working hard, as if it was eating candy. He squinted his eyes and could only see her little head. Tang Yu knew that it was embarrassing to make a sound, but he couldn't control himself. His body was extremely uncomfortable, but he couldn't really get rid of it. He grabbed her long hair with his big palm and said in a low voice, Chi, enough. His voice was so hoarse as if he had a mouthful of hot sand in his mouth. Pei Chi looked up and then bit hard on his neck. Suddenly, a warm kiss mark appeared on his neck. Tang Yu felt the pain, but it was too late. He actually wanted to remind her that his dinner party today was open to the public. There would be a lot of reporters, about 30 to 40. If he went to the meeting with such a kiss mark that couldn't be ignored, as his girlfriend, Pei Chi would be the first to be in the headlines. Tang Yu decided not to tell her. He waited for her to finish biting him before getting up. He stood and buttoned his shirt while bending down to kiss her. That kind of shallow and affectionate kiss made Pei Chi's toes curl up. He then said in a hoarse voice, "Let's continue next time." She curled up on the sofa and bit her fingers. Seeing that he had regained his elegant appearance, she felt that it was quite magical. Before Tang Yu left, he looked at the laptop again and smiled. Then he walked out. Of course, the result of that day's public dinner was, that day, the mayor of B City was also there. There were even military representatives and top figures from all over the world. Then, the late Tang Yu walked to his seat and sat down calmly with a heavy kiss mark on his neck. Old Master Lin's eyes were wide open as he stared at him. Was this still the outstanding grandson of his who walked away with such a kiss mark? Even he felt embarrassed for him to parade around with such a kiss mark. Shen Zhongshan's gaze became even more complicated, and there was also Shen Lian who was sitting beside him. This morning, she was openly raped by Pei Chi-Chi, and now she was secretly raped again. The hickey on Tang Yu's neck was Pei Chi-Chi's best weapon. Her face was very ugly, and she lowered her head. Shen Lian, it's time to let it go. Shen Zhongshan's voice was deep. You saw it too. Shen Lian pursed her lips and said nothing. Dad, if Pei Chi-Chi wasn't your daughter, would you let me give up? Is it because of your guilt towards Xiao Ku and Pei Chi-Chi that you already have other plans in your heart? However, Shen Lian did not show that she knew everything. Sometimes, if she didn't point it out, there would still be room to turn things around. Once it was pointed out, she was afraid that Pei Chi-Chi, that bitch, would come and want a share of Jean Taihe. Jean Taihe's assets were hundreds of billions, and it was not something that a small company like the Pei Corporation could compare to. Tang Yu sat down with an indifferent expression, as if he didn't know that his hickey was enough to set off a bloody storm in the financial report. He let the reporters take photos and spoke calmly. The dinner party lasted about an hour before it ended. Tang Yu walked very fast, avoiding old Master Lin's walking stick. In the parking lot, Shen Lian was leaning against the wall waiting for him. Tang Yu walked over to open the car door, and Shen Lian stopped him. Tang Yu. His hand paused for a moment, and he looked at Shen Lian. Manager Shen, what's the matter? Shen Lian looked into his eyes. You actually put up with her like this? Chapter 576. Tang Yu reached out and touched his neck. He smiled faintly. This isn't tolerance. Not tolerance. Shen Lian's expression was a little dazed. In the past, when she touched him, his expression was one of tolerance. Now that he was with Pei Chi-Chi, was he enjoying it? She didn't say anything and just looked at him. She remembered that he had taught her a lesson for Pei Chi-Chi. After a long time, she said softly, Are you free? Let's have a cup of coffee. Tang Yu didn't say anything. Why? You don't even have time for a cup of coffee. Shen Lian's voice was a little sharp. Tang Yu said slowly, Shen Lian, I've said it before. We're going over. I don't want Chi-Chi to misunderstand because of you. If she loves you, she won't misunderstand. Shen Lian was very stubborn. Tang Yu looked at her and didn't say anything. He turned around and opened the car door to get into the car. At that moment, Shen Lian quickly came over and grabbed his arm. She raised her head and looked at Tang Yu. She couldn't accept it. Even at this moment, she hated him, but she still loved him. She quickly pressed her lips against his and tasted the coldness in his eyes. Tang Yu was only shocked for a second before he pushed her away. Shen Lian took a step back and stared at him with tears in her eyes. Tang Yu. She looked at him. I can't accept it. Why is it her? Tang Yu took a tissue from the car and wiped his lips. His gaze was cold. This is the last time. With that, he got into the car and drove away. Shen Lian quickly rushed to the front of his car and stretched out her hand to block his car. 5 meters, 4 meters, 3 meters, she looked straight at him without any intention of avoiding his gaze. Tang Yu suddenly braked, and the car came to a screeching halt. He sat in the car and didn't move. After a long time, he opened the door and got out. He looked at Shen Lian and asked, "Are you crazy?" Shen Lian's tears fell down one by one, but she was proud. She raised her face to look at him and smiled softly. "Yes, I am crazy." Her voice slowly became sharp. "Tang Yu, I'm crazy. I still love you. How can you love someone else?" She cried her heart out, and he had long been indifferent to her. Finally, she slowly squatted down and hugged herself with her arms. She whispered to herself, "None of you love me. None of you love me." As she cried, she laughed. What's so good about her? Tang Yu's voice was a little cold. There's nothing good about her. She's exactly what I like. Shen Lian was still squatting down. Tang Yu walked past her and headed for the elevator. She burst into tears at the back, but no matter what, she couldn't bring him back. Her pride wouldn't allow her to beg like this. She was Shen Lian, the eldest daughter of the Shen family. Shen Lian slowly stood up. She wanted to crush Pei Qiqi in the competition at Marvel and let Tang Yu know who was the most suitable woman for him, and who was the most qualified person to stand by his side. There was a look of determination in Shen Lian's eyes. In the elevator, Tang Yu looked at the mirror and let out a deep breath. He could only be heartless towards Shen Lian. It would be unfair to Mu Qiqi if he were to say that he cared about their relationship. Tang Yu left in another car, and that car happened to belong to Old Master Lin. Old Master Lin held his walking stick and looked at Tang Yu's neck. He asked coldly, "Are you pestered by the Shen girl again?" Chapter 577. You have to figure this out. Don't let Pei Qiqi suffer in the future, Old Master Lin said. Old Master Lin was very clear about such matters. His family rules were strict. A married man had to take care of the family. No matter how good the women outside were, they couldn't be involved. Tang Ziyuan was a bloody example. Tang Yu smiled. Of course. Old Master Lin saw him smile and was a little angry. He glared at him. You can't even deal with a woman. What's the use of keeping you? Tang Yu laughed and touched his forehead with his slender fingers. Old Master, do you think Shen Lian can be dealt with money or violence? Old Master Lin rubbed his nose and didn't say anything. He said unhappily, "Anyway, you have to take care of your own matters. Since Pei Qiqi is going to be married, you have to treat her well no matter what her background is." Tang Yu smiled faintly and didn't say anything. Old Master Lin sulked again. Look at you now. You're swaggering around. Is your family the only one with a little lamb? As he said that, Old Master Lin couldn't help but look at him and snorted. You can't deal with a little girl. I have to give in. Tang Yu smiled. Let's not talk about this. Old Master Lin's eyes flashed. Don't think that I don't know why you insist on taking over Marvel first. Tang Yu still smiled faintly. Wang Ziki is a very good talent. Grandfather, I don't think I have the energy to manage 2 companies for the rest of my life. Old Master Lin was upset when he heard that. Then let's have a few more. At the mention of children, Tang Yu fell silent. His little girl didn't even let him touch her now. Where would he get children? At this point, Old Master Lin asked a few more questions. Has the wedding been decided? This girl won't change her mind again, will she? Tang Yu chuckled. It doesn't matter if she runs away from the wedding. I'll bring her back directly. The old man can have as many babies as he wants and then let her out. That way, she probably won't run away. Old Master Lin glared at Tang Yu with an infuriating gaze. He was so angry that he almost wanted to hit him with his walking stick. Do you think the pay lass is a pig? Tang Yu said calmly, I thought that would make the guild happier. Old Master Qin didn't say anything else. This brat was really glib-tongued. He didn't know if it was because he was with Pei Qingfeng that he was like this. Was it because he was used to bullying Pei Qingfeng? Thinking about it, the old man felt a little better. However, the old man was always a little childish, so he asked the driver to drop off Tang Yu halfway. The driver sighed and did not dare to disobey. He could only stop the car. Young master. Tang Yu tilted his handsome face and smiled faintly. If this kind of childish behavior makes the old man happy, I don't mind walking a few more steps. The car door closed and the driver asked carefully, It's about an hour's walk from here to Xingyuan. Is the old man really willing to let young master leave like this? Old Master Lin waved his hand and gestured for him to drive. He snorted coldly. What do you know? This is called improving the relationship between a young couple. He must be asking the pay lass to pick him up now. It was lunch break. If he took a nap or something, wouldn't he have a child? Giving birth to a child was a race against time. The driver understood instantly and nodded as he drove away. Tang Yu stood and watched the car drive away. He took out his phone and dialed Pei Qiqi's number. Chapter 578. Tang Yu coughed softly. Qiqi, I'm on Junhai Road. Drive over and let's have a meal together. I've already eaten. Pei Qiqi was uninterested. What a joke. The information on the computer had been destroyed. How could she still have a meal with him? He had eaten her up. She was not that stupid. Tang Yu paused. You're really not coming, huh? Yes, Mr. Tang. We're in a cold war now, so... Pei Qiqi smiled a little squeaky. So, walk back. This little bastard. How did she know that he had called her because of this? Tang Yu shook his head and smiled. He felt happy even when she was so mischievous. He took off his coat, put it on his arm, and slowly walked in the direction of Xingyuan. When he arrived at the company, Marvel called. It was Wang Ziqi's assistant. Mr. Tang, the results are out. Tang Yu pondered for a moment. Is this the result I wanted? There was a soft on the other side. Tang Yu did not ask further. From Pei Qiqi's reaction at noon, he knew that Shen Lian had been set up by Pei Qiqi. He smiled helplessly in his heart. He felt a little sad and a little proud of a child who had grown up. That black-bellied little thing was his Qiqi. After hanging up, Xiao Ran came in with an iced drink in her hand. Tang Yu looked at her. Xiao Ran held back his laughter. Boss Pei called and instructed me to do this. He said, to calm the boss down. No matter how cold Tang Yu was, he could not help but be angry and amused at this moment. This little fellow. He gestured for Xiao Ran to put the things down and watched her close the door before calling Pei Qiqi. When did you become so naughty? He sighed softly. Boss Pei should have sent himself here if he wanted me to calm down. I'm not stupid. Her voice was a little soft and a little mischievous. Tang Yu held the iced drink and said in a deep voice, Grandpa called you. She hummed softly, I also know that you've met Shen Lian. Tang Yu chuckled, his slender fingers fiddling with the cup. After a while, he chuckled and said, Did Grandpa tell you that today's dinner is open to the public? There. There are about 30 reporters at the scene. Pei Qiqi's face alternated between red and white. After a long time, she finally understood what he meant. Tang Yu, that bastard. However, Tang Yu had already hung up the phone. He was in an indescribably good mood. On the other hand, Pei Chi turned on her computer and searched for news related to Tang Yu. Today's financial headline was Tang Yu's hickey. Pei Chi watched the video. Tang Yu was really calm, and the camera was directly aimed at his neck. Pei Chi felt that it was impossible to live with such a black-bellied man. She had wanted to call him angrily, but after thinking about it, she didn't. Of course, Shen Lian also saw the video. It was so obvious that it could not be ignored. There was no need to say who left that hickey. Moreover, Tang Yu had made it clear in the interview that the wedding date was approaching. Shen Lian curled up on the sofa in the living room, looking at the television with her lips pursed tightly. Pei Chi, you should not have been born in this world. You are a bastard that Zhao Ku seduced my father and gave birth to. Now, you have stolen Tang Yu. I will not let you succeed. Chapter 579. When Shen Zhongshan came back, he saw Shen Lian sitting on the sofa, watching TV. The little maid carefully took off his coat and hung it up before leaving. Why didn't you turn on the light? Shen Zhongshan's voice was a little hoarse. It was obvious that he was drunk. He paused for a moment and asked, "Where's your mom?" Shen Lian sat there and didn't move. When Shen Zhongshan turned on the light, she reached out her hand to cover her eyes. Her body was still sitting on the sofa. After a long time, she smiled softly. "Dad, do you still care about Mom?" "What are you talking about?" Shen Zhongshan slowly sat down beside her and patted Shen Lian's leg. "Stop thinking nonsense." Shen Lian slowly sat up straight and looked straight into Shen Zhongshan's eyes. Then, she chuckled. "Dad, do you dare to say that you didn't do anything wrong to Mom?" Shen Zhongshan originally had a smile on his face. He also wanted to have a good talk with Shen Lian and enlighten her. But at this moment, there was probably no way to continue the talk. Shen Zhongshan stood up. "Sleep early." He slowly went upstairs, his mood ruined. Shen Lian was behind him. Suddenly, her voice was a little sharp. "Dad, do you dare to say that you didn't do anything?" "Enough." Shen Zhongshan stopped and turned around. His expression was a little cold. This was the Shen Zhongshan that Shen Lian had never seen before. It was somewhat unfathomable. Shen Zhongshan's eyes were also cold, or it could be said that he was indifferent and ruthless. No matter what you know, you have to pretend that you don't know. You can't even say a word to your mom. His voice was heavy. "Do you understand?" Shen Lian sat there. Her lips trembled. She didn't say anything for a long time. He admitted it. She closed her eyes. After a long time, she heard her weak voice. "I understand, Dad." Shen Zhongshan silently looked at her for a long time before saying softly, "You are the only heir of the Shen family. Do you understand?" Shen Lian's eyes were filled with tears. She didn't dare to say anything more. At this moment, she was not facing a father. Instead, he was a realistic businessman, a sophisticated businessman who prioritized profit over everything else. Back then, had he also faced Zhao Ku like this and spoken to her so mercilessly? Zhao Ku was really silly. Shen Lian suddenly laughed softly. Zhao Ku was really silly. In fact, she was silly too. Both of them were silly. She looked at Shen Zhongshan walking up the stairs with heavy steps until she couldn't hear his footsteps anymore. She stared blankly at the content on the TV. Suddenly, she grabbed an ornament and threw it at the TV. Suddenly, sparks flew in the living room. It was like a garbage dump. Shen Zhongshan stood in the middle of the stairs and looked at Shen Lian. Shen Lian didn't move. She curled up on the sofa and hugged herself. She cried silently, her voice choked. "Dad, don't worry about me. Let me cry for a while. Zhongshan looked at her and said softly, Lian. Lian. Shin she is. Said. Shin Lian, Shin. Shin Zhongshan looked at her. He pursed his lips and said softly, Shin Lian, you are not a child anymore. You should know what is important. Shin Lian didn't say anything. She just cried quietly. There was finally some warmth in Shin Zhongshan's eyes. No matter what, it was a blow to Shin Lian. Just as he was about to walk down, the door opened. Mrs. Shin came back from playing mahjong. When she saw the mess, she was stunned. Then, she saw that Shin Lian was crying. She couldn't help but be anxious. How did you end up like this? Shin Lian looked up and couldn't help but look at Shin Zhongshan. However, his eyes were calm and tranquil. Shin Lian knew that he wanted her to hide it, so she wiped her tears with a tissue. Tang Yu is getting married. I am angry. Mrs. Shin was fooled. She sighed. But you don't have to smash things like this. What if you get hurt? She asked the maid to bandage the wound. She tried to persuade Shin Lian to put it down. Mrs. Shin was deeply affected by this. She always hoped that her daughter would find a man who truly loved her. Even if he wasn't as outstanding as Tang Yu, it was fine. She thought that Qin Anlin was good to Shin Lian. If she had been with him, she wouldn't be here today. But Shin Lian was not the Shin Lian of the past. Qin Anlin was not the Qin Anlin of the past. Mrs. Shin sighed in her heart. She didn't say anything. Chapter 580. On Friday, the results of the competition were out. All the people in charge of the company sat down together. The relevant people from Marvel were also present. Only Tang Yu did not come. In fact, most people were prepared to lose. One was President Tang's new love, the other was his old love. The new love's pillow talk was powerful, the old love's company was powerful. Shin Lian and Pei Chi-Chi's seats were arranged in advance. It was not known if it was intentional, but the arrangement was a bit magical. They were on the opposite side of Tang Yu's seat. The two women sat facing each other. Just the murderous look in their eyes was enough to make people tremble. Of course, it was the others, trembling with excitement. At 9:00 sharp, Tang Yu came in on time, followed by Meng Qingqing. They sat down respectively. Tang Yu nodded at Manager Li from Marvel. Manager Li understood and took out the prepared materials. He looked around and smiled. After a round of comparison, the company that Marvel is working with this time has almost been decided. No one said anything. Manager Li continued. After a round of selection, the company that Marvel will be working with next season is. Pei Chi-Chi was calm while Shin Lian smiled triumphantly. Compared to Jean Taiha's, the one that Xiao Gao showed her could only be considered trash. She looked at Pei Chi-Chi with disdain. How could a pheasant be compared to a phoenix? Manager Li looked at the list, paused, and then slowly said the name of the company. Congratulations to Pei Consortium. He looked up at Pei Chi-Chi. Congratulations, Boss Pei. Pei Chi-Chi only smiled back. Shin Lian was stunned. How could it be? How could it be Pei Consortium? She had clearly seen that plan. It could not compete with Jean Taiha at all. However, the reality was that Pei Consortium had won the election. When Shin Lian looked up, she just happened to see Pei Chi-Chi accepting the congratulations of others. Why was the smile on that pretty little face so dazzling? Wait a moment. Shin Lian stood up and looked at Pei Chi-Chi. She smiled faintly and said, Pei family was able to defeat so many opponents this time. This plan must be outstanding. I want to see it. I think everyone here wants to see it too. Manager Li looked at Tang Yu. Tang Yu looked at Pei Chi and said slowly, "There's no need. Is it not necessary, or are you afraid?" Shen Lian's smile turned cold. Tang Yu looked at her with no expression on his face. "Manager Shen, do you want me to explain to you or tell you?" These words were a little too harsh. If at this moment, Shen Lian knew when to advance and when to retreat, it would be enough. However, she was unwilling. Moreover, she knew that if the Pei Consortium's plan was made public at this time, not only would Pei Chi lose face, but Tang Yu and Marvel would also lose face because of that plagiarized plan. Her eyes fell on Tang Yu's face. There was pain and love in her eyes. However, the unforgettable past was not left in Tang Yu's heart at all. For Pei Chi, he had mercilessly hit her self-esteem until there was no point left. So today, she wanted to regain her face. Didn't he prefer Pei Chi? Then she wanted to let Tang Yu know on such an occasion that Pei Chi was just a useless person. Let him know that he loved the wrong person. Chapter 581. Of course, Tang Yu could ignore her, but that would damage his reputation. At this moment, Pei Chi said softly, "Mr. Tang, the Pei Corporation's plan is about to be done, so there's nothing that can't be shown to the public." Tang Yu's gaze fell on Pei Chi's face. In his eyes, there was an imperceptible gentleness and a little pride. Pei Chi looked back carefully and continued, "I don't want Marvel's reputation to be tarnished because of the Pei Corporation. Of course, there's also President Tang." When she mentioned Tang Yu, she waved at him. Tang Yu's originally serious and handsome face couldn't keep up the act any longer. He looked at her and revealed a slight smile. It was very gentle. Pei Chi walked to Manager Li and said, "Manager Li, please give me the app made by the Pei Corporation." Manager Li quickly found it and handed it to Pei Chi. Pei Chi called Dink, put it in the computer and connected it to the wall cast. The app showed the concept of the Pei Corporation this time, as well as the advertising design. Pei Chi stood in front of the big screen and explained the short film. "We have a detailed understanding of Marvel's main product this season. It's as novel as ever, and of course, it's competitive in the market. But no matter how good a product is, it needs good promotion. How can we let these young people quickly understand or know about Marvel's electronic product?" Pei Chi smiled and looked at the people around the conference table. She was very generous. There was a touch of admiration in Tang Yu's and the others' eyes. After all, Pei Chi hadn't graduated from university yet, and he had studied design before, so he hadn't come into contact with this industry. Only Shen Lian was shocked. How could it be? How could it be? This wasn't the app that Xiao Gao had given her. She looked at Pei Chi in shock and almost blurted out, "This isn't it." But Shen Lian held back, because if she said it, it would mean that she had done something. However, she was not stupid. In these few seconds, she understood one thing. From the beginning to the end, Pei Chi had never been fooled. From the very beginning, Pei Chi had been toying with her like a monkey. She had been fooled. The one that Xiao Gao took was not the one that Pei Chi wanted to get from Marvel. Shen Lian gritted her teeth. She had really underestimated Pei Chi. Pei Chi didn't seem to notice Shen Lian's expression and continued with the content of the speech app. How to let young people understand Marvel's products better and faster. This is the focus of Pei Corporation's research this time. She smiled. Traditional advertisements are no longer acceptable to young people, because they can't possibly sit quietly in front of the television. Online drama advertisements. Of course, that's useful, but the group that watches online dramas is generally otaku, so they may not be the main group that consumes Marvel's electronic products. Chapter 582. That's right, it's the subway. Office workers spend 1 to 2 hours on the subway every day. I think the effect would be the most obvious and fastest if we put advertisements on the screens of the subway carriages. At the same time, we will print the WeChat ID of Marvel's product page in all the conspicuous places on the subway. I believe that the Marvel crowd will welcome a critical hit. After Pei Chi finished speaking, there was a round of applause. Tang Yu smiled. He could not describe the feeling in his heart. There was a kind of joy, like a girl who had just grown up. Their Chi had grown up and could take care of things on her own. Moreover, he knew that in the battle of wits with Shen Lian, his Chi had won. What a black-bellied little thing. At that moment, Meng Qingqing leaned over and said in a low voice, I couldn't tell. There are many things that you can't tell. Tang Yu chuckled and clapped twice. Seeing him like that, Meng Qingqing sighed in his heart, did he have to? Look at how precious he was. When Pei Chi met Tang Yu's gaze, she smiled faintly. However, Shen Lian sat there, her whole body cold. That was because she had nothing to say, she had lost, completely lost. Tang Yu stood up and walked to Pei Chi. Congratulations, Boss Pei. He reached out his hand to her. Pei Chi was stunned for a moment. She lifted her little face and looked straight into his eyes. After a long time, she placed her little hand in his palm was dry and warm. Slowly, he reached out and held her hand. Amidst her gasps of surprise and the crowd's astonishment, Tang Yu pulled her into his embrace. It was a very restrained hug. His thin lips pressed against her ear, and his voice was a little hoarse. Our Chi is really amazing. She rested her face on his shoulder, feeling a little warm. In just 2 seconds, Tang Yu let go of her decisively and walked back to his seat to announce, Marvel has prepared a celebration party, and King Entertainment will be joining us. At the scene, many people congratulated Pei Chi. No one was a fool. They could all see that Pei Chi was capable, and it was not that Tang Yu was biased. At that moment, Shen Lian could not say anything more. She sat there motionlessly with an indifferent expression on her face. Had she lost? She was defeated, utterly defeated. She chuckled softly and left without a sound. Shen Lian's tears rolled down her cheeks as she walked outside. Why? Why did Pei Chi snatch her father and Tang Yu away? Was Pei Chi going to dip his fingers into her family's company? Shen Lian held her head high. She was really afraid. She had underestimated Pei Chi. Today, Pei Chi was no longer the pitiful little girl she used to be, no longer the little girl hiding behind Tang Yu. Between her and Pei Chi, it was not just a matter of love, but also a competition between women. Shen Lian knew very well that although her father thought highly of her in the past few years, and she was the only successor, Shen Lian was very clear about it. But now, it was different. Now there was Pei Chi, and Pei Chi was about to marry Tang Yu. This was different for Shen Zhongshan. She was also a daughter, but if she managed to get on Shen Yuan's good side, would her father sacrifice her, his own daughter? Shen Lian did not know. She was terrified. She had the fear that she was about to lose everything. Turning around, she saw Pei Chi. That face looked very much like the young Zhao Ku. Chapter 583. When Pei Chi returned to the Pei Corporation from Marvel, Little One had already heard about the Pei Corporation's attack. Pei Chi and Ding Ku had just entered the company when someone sprayed ribbons on both sides. The thud was a little scary. However, it made people very happy. Pei Chi patted her chest and looked at Little One. You're being naughty again. Everyone in the company was happy. Little one was even more impolite. Boss Pei, I'm a few years older than you. Yes, big sister one. Pei Chi smiled and then took off the ribbons on her hair. Ding Ku was also surrounded by a few young female employees he had been taken a fancy to. One had to know that he had gained face for the company this time. What kind of company was Jean Taihe? The planning team was almost all from the Ivy League. The battle between the Pei Corporation and Jean Taihe this time was tantamount to hitting a rock with an egg. However, Ding Ku was just that powerful and capable. Ding Ku, you're so amazing. You're so capable. The female employees were flirting. As for the IT man, Ding Ku, it was obviously rare for women to be so attentive to him. He scratched his head and said a little embarrassedly, "Not really, it's mainly because Boss Pei's creativity is good. It's also because you're capable." The female employees continued to flirt. Ding Ku would definitely be valued by Boss Pei now, and Boss Pei would be the wife of the president of Xingyuan in the future. In the future, Ding Ku might enter Xingyuan and become a top talent. It was incomparable. Pei Chi and Little Wen stood side by side. Pei Chi looked at Little Wen and smiled. "What do you think?" Little Wen snorted. "Fickle. I think Ding Ku is a little dull. Are all IT men like this? I heard that there are many who stay single their entire lives." Little Wen's eyes looked over there. Her eyes were burning red, almost burning a hole in them. "Soon, he won't be." Pei Chi looked at her face and sighed slightly. "That's right. Actually, I think that if you like someone, you should chase after him. If you miss him, it'll be gone." Her voice was a little low. "The celebration banquet tomorrow night is a good opportunity." With that, Pei Chi left, leaving behind Xiao Wen, who was still looking on. Her eyes were still burning red and her hands were clenched into fists as she watched Dink being surrounded by a group of female demons. An image appeared in front of her. Dink was eaten up bit by the vixen. His whole body was covered with lipstick marks, and later, hickeys. After that, she decided that since he was going to be eaten anyway, she might as well be the one to eat him. As she left with Pei Chi, she had no idea that as she turned around, Dingku's gaze was directed in her direction. There was a profound look in his eyes. Was this considered provoking her? I guess so. Who said that IT guys were slow? Who said that they had no EQ? Dink was very black-bellied. Little Wen walked into Pei Chi-Chi's office and asked pitifully, "Boss Pei, can I reimburse you for the gown tomorrow?" Those female demons would definitely sneak in as well. That was for sure. It was impossible for the Pei Corporation to attend such a banquet with only 2 or 3 people. If there were too few people, they would appear weak. Therefore, if he wanted to win among a group of female demons, he would have to spend money to dress up. Pei Chi looked at Little Wen and said slowly, "I can probably prepare another gown for you. There might also be matching accessories to go with it." Little Wen was stunned for a moment before she cheered. That was great. Chapter 584. It was already 8 p.m. when she got home. The white Shimei stopped outside the apartment. Before she alighted from the car, she saw a certain man leaning against the building, looking relaxed. Under the moonlight, his handsome face looked like a god, exuding an aura of elegance. His eyes were so deep that she almost drowned in them. She looked at him quietly for a long time before alighting and walking towards him. "Why didn't you tell me that you were coming?" Tang Yu was still leaning against the building, his gaze deep. "I didn't know if you would welcome me." As he said that, he chuckled. "I was afraid that our boss Pei is still angry." Pei Chi snorted. "Yes, he's still angry." As she said that, she wanted to walk forward. However, her arm was quickly pulled back, her arm was pressed against the wall, and her mouth was kissed. She wanted to break free, but her arm was also hugged by him. His palm was behind her, preventing her from rubbing against the hard wall. His long fingers ran through her long hair, stroking her scalp soothingly. Pei Chi struggled slightly, the words she wanted to say were stuck between her teeth. He chuckled, his long legs moving forward, preventing her from moving. Tang Yu, she said weakly, not here. In that instant, his body stiffened. The stormy kiss calmed down, and he licked and kissed her lips as if he was comforting her. Go home, Chi-Chi. His voice was a little hoarse, and it sounded a little slow. However, that was not what his Yuang was expressing. His body was about to explode, she could feel it. Tang Yu finally let go of her, brought her to the elevator, and kissed her all the way up. She wanted to say no, but she was pressed against the wall of the elevator, her arms were raised high, and their bodies were pressed together shamefully. Pei Chi felt as if her body was on fire. Being kissed like that by him, she turned into water. Chi, the key. He had not touched her for more than 10 days. There was enough ammunition, and the arrow had to be fired. Pei Chi was fine at first, but she could not stand being kissed like that. He lowered his finger and found the key. Tang Yu walked out of the elevator with her in his arms. He was ready to push her against the door as soon as he opened it. In any case, she would not be able to sleep tonight. But when Big Brother and Big Sister walked out of the elevator while kissing, they saw little Tang Xan sitting pitifully at the door. The little hedgehog watched them kissing and swallowing their saliva. Her eyes were wide open. Did she come at the wrong time? As an elder brother, no matter what he wanted to do, he could only extinguish the fire in his body when he saw Tang Xan looking at him like this. He exhaled and asked in a deep voice, "Why are you here?" Tang Xan didn't move. "Big brother, do you think I'm annoying? I'm worried about your safety." He calmed down and motioned for Pei Chi to open the door. Then, he picked up the little fellow's arm and pulled her back. "Aren't you afraid of the cold sitting on the ground?" Tang Xan whimpered and followed behind Pei Chi like a pug. "Chi, do you have noodles at home? I want to eat your shredded chicken noodles." Pei Chi rubbed her buzz cut. She was annoyed and amused at the same time. "You sneaked out so late at night just to eat noodles." Tang Xan was silent. Pei Chi did not say anything either, waiting for her to speak. Chapter 585. Pei Chi and Tang Yu looked at each other. Tang Yu knew about this matter. The one who Tang Ziyuan played with was a small-time model. He had slept with her when Zhao Ku was still alive. Zhao Ku was in jail, but Tang Ziyuan didn't care about that model. She wanted to chase after Lin Yun before she could even clean up her mess. He looked at Tang Xan and sighed silently. After a while, the siblings occupied the sofa and Pei Chi obediently went downstairs. However, she would pop her head out to look at them from time to time. This made Tang Yu not know whether to laugh or cry. He almost didn't have any physical contact with Tang Xan anymore. First, Tang Xan was growing up. Second, she wasn't his biological sister. No matter how close they were, he had to avoid her. Pei Chi brought the noodles over and Tang Xan wolfed it down. She was a small and skinny person, so she looked pitiful. After finishing half a bowl, Tang Xan finally calmed down. She looked up and saw Pei Chi sparkling eyes. Tang Xan blushed. "Chi, don't look at me like that. I'll think too much." "Nonsense." Tang Yu patted her head. Tang Xan's eyes were filled with little hearts. "Chi, you're amazing." He put down his chopsticks and clasped his hands together. "I heard that you defeated that White Lotus." White Lotus. Pei Chi was stunned at first, but then she understood immediately. She looked at a certain man meaningfully. Mr. Tang pretended not to see anything and let them talk. He quickly finished the bowl of chicken noodles. It was as delicious as ever. You guys talk, I'm going to take a shower. He got up and looked at Pei Chi. His eyes were saying, I'll wait for you. Hurry up. Under such a fervent gaze, Pei Chi blushed a little. Tang Axian, on the other hand, didn't understand. Sigh, this poor child. Her first teacher was her brother and sister. Tang Yu returned to Pei Chi's room first, and Tang Axian pestered Pei Chi to sleep with her. Originally, she didn't have 2 bedrooms, but the last time Tang Axian came over, she had to use a smaller bedroom. Chi, let's sleep together. Tang Axian hugged Pei Chi and whined. Pei Xiaoqi thought that today wasn't the day to get pregnant, so she felt that it would be useless to do anything with Tang Yu, so she happily agreed. Tang Axian finished washing up and happily sat on the bed, waiting for her. Chi, hurry up. Pei Chi nodded. Come back after you take a shower. Looking at the time, it was 10 o'clock. Tang Yu probably wouldn't have the patience to wait. He had been very busy these days. Maybe he had already fallen asleep. She straightened her clothes and pushed open the bedroom door. But just as she pushed the door open, her arm was pulled by a force, and she fell into a warm embrace. Her little face was pressed against his chest, and she could feel his abnormal heat through his shirt. So late. His voice was hoarse, as if he had a mouthful of hot sand in his mouth, and it sprayed on her soft ear. She put her little hand on his shoulder, and poked his shoulder with her slender fingers. Her voice was soft. Tang Axian wants me to sleep with her. His body tensed up, and he bit her little ear. Pei Chi, what should I do? She was in his arms, and she could naturally feel his what to do. Her little finger continued to poke his shoulder, and her face was close to his warm neck. She was extremely innocent. Think of a way yourself.